Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, let's start with the $34 million or so that was transferred. Where did it come from? What does it mean to the operations of the Coast Guard that you have $34 million less, or maybe even more than 34? Bring us up to date. Where was it taken from your budget to transfer to ICE? What does that mean to your operations?
Well, Ranking Member Garamendi, yes, in fact, there was about a $32+ million transfer. What I would say, sir, is that without consequences? Absolutely not. You know, in an organization that takes every dollar supported by the taxpayer towards, I think what I'd say is goodness for the nation, obviously every nickel matters. But in this case, I would say we have the maneuver space. Reprogrammings are a typical part of budgets. We are one of 22 agencies that sit within the Department of Homeland Security. As I've been in and out of Washington the last 15, 20 years of my life, I'm not sure I've seen a budget cycle where there hasn't been a reprogramming in the department the Coast Guard has sat in, whether that was the Department of Transportation of yesteryear or DHS today. That said, sir, I think to answer in response to your question, I think we take some shortages on spare parts. Some of it goes towards, you know, efforts to support shore infrastructure recapitalization in terms of the execution of that. There's consequence, but it's manageable. I will assure you it has not diminished our ability to respond to frontline operations such as recent Hurricane Florence response operations and recovery operations.
So you're saying it wasn't terribly important and therefore we can take $34 million out of next year's budget?
Sir, I'm not saying that taking a dollar from the Coast Guard budget isn't important. I would say, you know, as an operating organization, as a component under a larger department with broad-ranging duties spread across 22 components, it's a part of, I guess, existing in this town.
You've been involved in Hurricane Florence recovery?
Sir, I will tell you quite with great certainty, it did not diminish our ability to respond to Hurricane Florence.
What was the daily cost of the search and rescue in the Florence?
Sir, I don't have a number. I would say our search and rescue costs are rolled into our ops and support. Our budget model, as you know, is very complicated because of our multi-mission nature. But we surged 27 aircraft essentially operating out of the Carolinas. We had 11 fixed-wing aircraft. We surged, you know, upwards of 3,000 Coast Guard men and women. We had the maneuver space in our budget, sir, to do that without any diminution of capability or capacity.
And Florence is the last hurricane this year?
Sir, the chairman talked about as the season drove towards an end here. It's pretty early in the year, and typically we're on high alert till the end of the hurricane season in 30 November, sir. So we're paying a lot of attention to the Atlantic Basin activity.
You will be able to develop and deliver to this committee the average daily cost of those 27 aircraft and 30,000 personnel that were involved in Florence?
Yes, sir, 3,000, but we will deliver that back to you, Mr. Rankin.
The average daily cost?
Yes, sir.
I would appreciate that. I suspect there'll be another hurricane, and that $34 million is coming out of something.
Aye, Mr. Garamendi. Got it.
Okay. Potomac River security closings. Big hullabaloo about that. Last in 2017, Admiral Zumkov said that the eastern side of the Potomac would not be closed whenever the president arrived on the western side. Those closings, I am told, are now that the east is closed and the west is closed whenever the president's at his golf course. Could you bring us up to date on the current policy?
Yes, sir. And Ranking Member Garamendi, regarding the river closure, there is a river closure when the president is at the Trump National Golf Course there, but there is what I would say is a reasonable accommodation. We provide security at the behest of the U.S. Secret Service for presidential security. They have asked us to mitigate the risks on that waterway. I understand there's an ongoing lawsuit filed here recently, earlier this month. There is a mechanism by which kayakers, canoers, other waterway users can contact Sector Maryland National Capital Region. They can request a pass-through. I believe that area is served by cellular phone where there should be a means to reach the sector. We are aware, and there's some frustration that, you know, the final rule went into effect, and there's been comments after that. We are sensitive to those comments. We will reach back to waterway users, understand suggested alternatives, and look at that. But obviously, first and foremost, as an operating agency of the government, we respond to the U.S. Secret Service request to support the president from a security standpoint.
36 times you've closed the river?
Sir, I'm not sure the exact number. There's a significant number of times, but there is a means, what I would say, I think is a reasonable combination for folks to transit through that section of the river. It's about a 2-mile stretch of the river that's impacted.
Apparently, that's not the case now, that your current policy is to close the river completely.
Mr.
I've,
Garamendi,
I've
I'll get
gone
back to
through
you.
my time.
The closure with no pass-through is not my understanding of the circumstances, but I will circle back, sir, with you or your staff and clarify that if I am mistaken on that.
If you would, please.
Yes, sir.
I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. The chair will now recognize Mr. Weber for 5 minutes.